Buenos dias. I'm Diana Marrero. Welcome to the Hill's first ever Latina Leaders Summit. Bienvenidas. The summit is an initiative of the Hill Latino, a new English language portal I launched early last year on thehill.com. At the very outset, I would like to thank our premier level sponsor, PG&E, and supporting level sponsor, Telemundo, for making this event possible. As many of you know, the Hispanic population is growing rapidly across the United States, transforming entire communities and the nation itself. Yet Latinas in particular are underrepresented in leadership positions across the board. We're here today to explore issues with big implications not just for Latinas, but for American leadership, the country's workforce, and the economy. What is needed to make leadership opportunities more accessible for people of color? What unique challenges do Hispanic women face in rising to management positions? How can current Latina leaders act as role models and mentors for the next generation of American leaders? This morning, we have gathered a stellar lineup of Latina leaders from government, education, business, and media for a dialogue on diversity, leadership, and building a pipeline of tomorrow's leaders. We also happen to have an impressive number of Latinas in the audience, including several women who made our Latina Leaders to Watch list in today's issue of The Hill, which you all have on your chairs. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. In addition to our audience in attendance, we're live streaming on thehill.com. Please keep your phones on silent. However, we do encourage you to engage in the discussion on social media. You can follow us on Twitter at The Hill Events and comment using the hashtag #TheHillLatina. We're going to be taking questions from the audience during the program, so please be on the lookout for members of our team with handheld mics. You can also tweet questions to our hashtag #TheHillLatina. Finally, there's a short feedback survey on your chairs. We would welcome your comments, and I would encourage you to complete the survey at the end of today's program. So let's dive right in. We begin this morning with the very first Hispanic woman to serve in Congress. Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen was born in Cuba and fled the island with her family as a young girl. They put down roots in Miami, where the future Congresswoman began working as a teacher. That inspired her to seek a career in public service. Now, after decades representing Florida's 27th congressional district, Ros-Lehtinen is retiring from Congress, but I'm venturing to guess not from public service. I'm really pleased to have her here. I'm from Miami, and I've known her since I was a kid, so this is a real honor. With that, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Chairman Emeritus of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen.
Felicidades, Your Honor.
And joining her on stage to lead the conversation is CNN anchor Ana Cabrera. Ana, as you all know, hosts the weekend primetime edition of CNN Newsroom. Ana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. It is a thrill to be here with you.
Well, I'm so glad to be here with you.
Thank you. And I see a few of the Latinas to watch in the audience. I saw that edition already. Felicidades.
All right, we're going to dive in because we really don't have much time. And I know that you are a busy woman. You know, I want to get kind of the elephant in the room out of the air first. And first, just...
I know I've gained weight, but come on. Gosh, kind of harsh to start that way.
No, you know, on a serious note, this event, I wondered, is it going to go on tomorrow after what happened yesterday with your colleague, Representative Scalise? And I first just want to say hearts and prayers, our positive healing energy is there with his family and with your colleagues.
Thank you. Steve is a phenomenal person, and thank you, Anna, for the prayers and the thoughts, and please send good vibes, not only to Steve, our majority whip, but also to the others who are injured. One is also still in critical condition, but the show must go on. It's important to always send a message that bad guys cannot stop our daily life. And just like Ariana Grande went back to Manchester, had that benefit concert, so we will be having the baseball game, and our lives must go on. We will not let evil destroy us.
Well said.
Good.
How's he doing? Do you have an update for us?
You know, he's in critical condition, but he's made it through the first critical day, and that's a very good sign. That's what the doctors say. We can get through tonight. He said about last night, things are going to be a lot better. So, you know, that's all I'll say. And just thank you to the Capitol Police. Thank you to all of these wonderful heroes who really sacrificed so that it wasn't a more difficult situation. And I'm on the congressional softball team. I was the first woman on that baseball team.
You go, girl.
But my skills have not improved. But we play next week, and I hope that you come out to cheer us on, just like you're going to come out today for the baseball game. Come to the congressional bipartisan team. It's women versus the media. So we need. Anna is not on the team, but maybe next year.
It's a good thing I'm not on the team. I would not represent well. I can be the biggest cheerleader, though. You know, a lot of people are here because they want to know about how you ended up where you are. You're now getting ready for Act 2. You'll be retiring this year, but you've broken so much ground in your career as a congresswoman. And I'm curious to learn more about your journey and, you know, how you ended up in these shoes. Just to get it out there, she is the first Hispanic woman ever to serve in Congress. That's huge.
I had no idea until I got there.
The first Cuban American to serve on Congress, the first woman to chair a standing committee, the House Foreign Affairs Committee. You've been in elected office representing the nation and representing Florida since 1989. So
yeah, and then 82 with the state legislature.
As a state legislator, exactly.
Before you were born, before any of you were born, I was already in office.
That's nice of you to say that. But I'm curious, being a woman and being Latina, have you faced unique challenges because of that?
I would say that everyone here who is from whatever minority group, you would have to say yes to that question. I'm not saying that we faced discrimination tougher than other people. No, some people have really had it tough. Jennifer, is that you? Yeah. Jennifer is our congresswoman from Puerto Rico, and they just had an amazing. What are you doing lurking in the shadows there, woman? Felicidades.
What types of challenges have you faced? How do you overcome those?
You know, I think in some ways you try to get those challenges and turn them into positives. You kind of stand out and people are looking at you and they think, you know, what is she all about? And you just prove them wrong. And it's not that you want to blend in. You want to stand out. But you want to let them know you're just as competent, you're just as smart, you're just as worthy of that position, and that you didn't get it because you're a woman or because you're Hispanic. You won it because of your issues and your passion for what you do, and by golly, you earned it just as they did. And I think that's the way that you're going to make it, no matter if you're working in a factory or in a bank or working as a CEO of a company or being a member of Congress from Puerto Rico or Florida.
And I'm looking at the iPad here because if you do have specific questions, feel free to send those in, and I'll try to work some of those in throughout our discussion. There will be a 5-minute Q&A in which you can also voice your questions on the microphone. So keep thinking about those as we continue our discussion. You have such a positive attitude. You talked about passion, and it shines through clearly after all this time.
I love what I do.
It seems like you're not jaded. How is that?
No, I wake up happy. I go to sleep happy. And you have that choice. Sometimes life throws at you some bad pitches, and there's no denying. I mean, we can get terribly sick, or you're living in poverty, or you're part of the working poor. There are some tough situations, and I don't know how people in those difficult situations make it through. They're the ones that you have to say, wow, you have this spirit. But you have to learn to be compassionate, empathetic toward other people. Everyone that you look at and you talk to, you don't know what's going on inside of that person's life. And you may think that person is just like you. You don't know what obstacles she has overcome to be here. And so I love what I do because I get to meet people from all walks of life. And I'm just a happy fool. I love what I do. Listen to this job. You get to meet different people. Today, look at you. you're wonderful, and I'm getting to meet you. Then I go vote, and I was born in Cuba. I came here sin saber ni una palabra de inglés, and I get to vote on these important issues, and then I get to have a wonderful family when I get home. It's just, I have a blessed life, and every one of you can have a blessed life, no matter how difficult your circumstances, and not that you can will your way out of poverty or disease, but you know, your attitude matters so much. Your attitude and how you view your circumstance. You can control how you feel about that.
I wonder what mistakes you've learned from over the years. You know, I always say I learn more from my failures than my successes in terms of how we grow as people. And if you were to offer kind of life's lessons, career lessons to the folks who are here and who may be wanting to pursue a career in politics and public service as yourself, what mistakes have you overcome and have learned from that you can pass along?
That's a good question. And you know, we were speaking before we came on, and she's got 2 children. One of them is 18 months old, just a little baby. And all of us, no matter what you're doing, we have this balance that we're trying to find that magic formula. And I always still struggle with it. And I think back about other things that I could have done differently. Maybe I could have, you know, spent more time here or spent more time there, but we do the best we can. You can't berate yourself and say, oh man, I really blew it. You'd never get over that bad feeling. You gotta live for today, live for tomorrow, and build on those mistakes. I've made plenty of them. And
like what?
You know, I just don't dwell on them, you know, and I just, you know,
What has been your biggest mistake if you were to look back on your
I didn't pay attention to a certain vote, and I voted a different way that I wanted to, and I could obsess on that, but there's going to be another vote tomorrow, and just get over your mistakes. We're all human, and you're human. I mean, we all blow it every once in a while. And Gabby knows. Where's Gabby? Gabby knows what I'm talking about a vote. We won't go into it. But I meant to vote one way, and I voted the other way.
Can you share with us?
No.
Why not?
No.
You're
and
retiring.
it wasn't that long ago. No.
You're retiring. Come on.
Some things are better left unsaid. No. But I blew it. But whatever. There's another day and another vote, and I'm going to do right.
Well, you know, it takes a lot to admit that you have made mistakes on voting, because your vote is
very
on record, right? And it's out there for people to judge, to see, but that's also why you're elected, to do the best you can. People are putting their trust in you. Why did you choose this path of public service?
Heck if I know, because I was never in politics. Yesterday I met with a group of youth commissioners. They get elected countywide. They're still in high school. And I said, gee, when I was your age, I was doing everything but that. I was not in student government. I was not involved. I was just, you know, I had hardworking parents. We worked in my parents' forwarding business. And I grew up in a house where we talked about freedom and opportunity. I lost my homeland to communism. So we talked about human rights and democracy. And we talked about the value of work. My parents were great role models. I always wanted to be a teacher, and that's what I became. I never would have thought, never, that I had an opportunity in politics. It wasn't even an option. I mean, it just didn't. That's why I think role models are so important, and what you do in your life, you're a role model for somebody else. You don't have to be a member of Congress to be a role model.
Who is your biggest role model?
Well, when I first got to Congress, a gentleman, you don't even know his name, Dante Fascell, was a congressman from the Miami area, and he was such a humble guy. And here he was, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and he was just a regular guy. And he took me under his wing, and he showed me how Congress works and how you can make your family work with this job. And to me, he was a mentor. There weren't very many women in politics then, and now there are a whole lot. Not as many as we'd like, because we want you and you and you and you and you to run, and you're going to win because you're going to have determination and you're going to know the issues. But I didn't really have a female role model. there weren't that many of us.
Yeah.
And certainly no Latinas.
Let me ask you about that, because right now, you mentioned there are a lot, but at the same time, it's not enough. I mean, right now, you look at the congressional makeup, and out of 535 members of Congress, both House and Senate, only 104 women in Congress right now, about 20%, not quite. 38 are women of color, only 10 are Latinas. Why is that? Why do you think there isn't more diversity right now in Congress?
You're right. Congress, you take a snapshot, it is not representative of this audience or any, of course, we're a little bit slanted here, but it's not representative of any kind of audience. We don't represent America. We need more diversity. And I think that the most difficult part, Anna, is that is fundraising, the cost of campaigns. People hear about it and they read about, you know, so-and-so got into trouble, and they think that politics is dirty, politics is not for me. And we're not great role models. That's number one. We're not projecting a very positive picture for Americans about politicians. Look at all the fighting, and we can't even pass a budget. We're not doing it right, so the fault lies in us, first of all. And secondly, you know how hard it is to raise money, and people think, I'm not gonna get into that, to then what? Serve and just be nasty and bitter toward each other.
Right.
So we need to clean up our own act so that we can have quality people like all of you running for office.
Politics has become so polarizing. It seems like bipartisanship is a bad word. And yet, you are somebody who has been respected and recognized for reaching across the aisle, for not always towing the party line on your votes. And I'm wondering, you know, as you're reflecting back, one, why aren't more of your colleagues like yourself? And how do you get bipartisanship back into legislating?
You are so right. When I first got here, remember this is 28 years ago, it'll be 29 by the time I retire. This was so different. What you have grown up with, because you're all young folks, this is not the way it used to be. This is not the normal way of doing the country's business. It is now a gotcha game. And every election cycle can be a shift. And so the stakes are very high. And that's why you have these gotcha bills and these gotcha votes and these gotcha interviews from CNN. No, not fake news, not fake news. And the media are our friend.
Mark those words.
Yes, I do not have that attitude. But very few people have that kind of bipartisan attitude. You're so right. When you compromise, you give in a little, the other person gives in a little, and you work out a deal. Oh my goodness, that's a bad word. Compromise is the new four-letter word, and it's really tough. And Jennifer knows, you know, at the committees, it's dog eat dog.
How do you change that, though, given the current political climate?
For some members, their districts are so overwhelmingly Republican or so overwhelmingly Democrat that they don't come from a base where you have to make compromise. And if you make a compromise, you're looked upon as weak. If you stick to your guns, you mean you've got principles? No, you're so obstinate and stubborn. We can't get government to function. Government has got to be a compromise. It is not a problem. And I don't think with the makeup of these districts, Anna, I really don't have a rosy outlook that it's going to change, because every election could shift the power of who controls Congress. This next election, pivotal, and we're only talking about, let's say 30 seats, no more than that. And people think this seat is vulnerable, and that's how you feel about every vote. That's why I won't even tell you what that vote was. Forget it. I'm not even running again.
But yeah, I mean, why exactly though? But why is it so hard to admit that then, when you feel like you have a vote you regret? Why can't you say it out loud?
I don't think people like to hear that you make mistakes. I mean, you want members of Congress to be human, and at the same time, you're thinking, gosh, how could she have voted in an incorrect way? You kind of don't want to hear it. you want to know that we're human, but not too human. So there's a lot of expectations from everybody's. Where you work, you don't want to admit very much that you made a mistake, right? I mean, it may humanize you, but it may get you fired too. So there's a fine line there. I'm still trying to surf my way through this job.
Yeah.
I learn every day.
Can I ask you about the gender pay gap? Because it seems like this has become a partisan issue. And when you look at, Forbes just released its top 100 celebrities and the incomes. And when you look at their list, women comprise just 16% of that group. So obviously that reflects a gender pay gap across industries.
And we're
alone.
talking about the elite.
Now, do you support?
And they have a gender
Do you
gap.
believe that women should be making equal pay?
Yes, but I don't think that that's something that you can legislate. We wish that we could. I think that you need to raise the consciousness of people to say, how could you pay a woman less than you pay a man? And I believe that you should sue that company. I believe you bring them to court. I believe you file complaints in the Human Resources Department. Do everything you can. Passing a law like we want to believe that there's a magic solution. Everyone will be paid, we want that to happen. But in reality, the way that the workplace functions, that's just not going to happen. You're never going to be able to do that. But you can sue the heck out of those companies, and we should. We need to be more active. We need to take it to the courts. I think that's where the solution is. I don't think that the solution for the gender gap is ever going to be in the political realm.
Okay.
I think it's going to be in the courts.
And
that's where you really shame them.
5 minutes left for this panel. So if you have a question, raise your hand. We'll get a mic over to you. I'm going to follow up with a quick question about Cuba because that's where you're from.
Yeah.
You came here as an 8-year-old from Cuba, and you have been a vocal opponent to the Castro regime, so much so that you were nicknamed by Fidel Castro the Big Bad Wolf.
La Loba Feroz. I love it.
La Loba
I put it on my license plate, but then I noticed, oh no, people know that who you are. Then you can't. You have to be a super good driver, and sometimes whatever. So
you
I took
don't
it
want
off.
to stand out so much
6 months
that way,
later,
right?
esa chapa la.
Now, we are expecting an announcement of some sort tomorrow from this administration on the Cuba policy. Expected that this president will roll back the softening that we saw under President Obama. Now, did he consult with you? Did President Trump ask what you?
Mario, I have not met President Trump. I don't work with him, but Mario Diaz-Balart has been our point man on Cuba issues. You have to specialize in certain issues. You can't do everything. So some people are known as the healthcare person or the labor rights, and Mario for us has been that point person. He's been negotiating with the White House. The president is going to fly down on Air Force One tomorrow, go to the Manuel Artimes Center in Little Havana and explain what his executive order is. And it's all in the implementation, and it basically is going to be you can't do business with any entity that has ties to the Cuban military. And
that's what you're hearing is going to be the
So what we want is freedom, democracy, anything that helps the people of Cuba and doesn't help the regime. Because the regime gets money, they use it to beat up on dissidents. Las Damas de Blanco, you talk about role models. These are ladies who dress in white. You've probably heard of them. They have a flower in their hand, and they march peacefully to church every Sunday, and for that, with a photo of their loved one who's a political prisoner in jail. And the state police comes in Cuba, and they beat them, and it is unbelievable what's happening to them. And those are some incredible role models. I mean, there are some incredible women in the world who really have it tough, and they're standing up for their principles. I have it easy, so it's not a problem for me.
Let's get a question or two from the audience if we have them. I have more questions for her if you don't have them. But if you have it, raise your hand big and high, loud, up in front. Quick, bring the mic.
Okay.
My name is Cristela, and I had a question for you. You talked about compromise and bipartisanship. To what point at either party, since you R&R, do you compromise? Like, where does the compromise line?
I know what you mean.
Values versus, as a queer woman of color, I
Yeah.
would never be able to.
You can't compromise on basic values like that. I'm not talking about that kind of compromise. You know, when it comes to human rights, fairness, equality, there's no compromise on that. I was talking about the budget. You know,
What current
you are
issues
so
when,
right.
when we look at healthcare,
when you look at core values, there's
immigration,
you can't compromise.
taxes, the current issues that are out there right now, do you see compromise on any of these?
That's where we need compromise. We need to come together as a nation and say, we've got to keep the government open. We should not say the goal is a government shutdown. We have members of Congress who are actually advocating government shutdown. No, that's not the solution. That's the problem. We need to come together, compromise on tax reform, on the budget, all of those issues, healthcare that you talked about.
Where are you willing to
not
compromise?
On
If you were
values.
to lead the way, where would you compromise on the issue of immigration?
Well, that for me and for Lucille, and you'll hear from her, I'm a refugee, I'm an immigrant. This country opened its arms to me. How comfy, right? For me to say, oh, I'm here, you can't come in, and those of you who are here, too, on you. No, no, no. We need to be fair. We need to have a good immigration system that treats the people who are already here in a humane manner, and then put a system in place where we're able to really have border security. And whether you're from California or whether you're from Florida, wherever, we all know people who are not here legally. They don't have their papers, but they love this country and they pay taxes and they're good people. What do we earn as a nation when we separate
Should they
mothers
have a
and
path
fathers to
to
children?
legal status, those
Legal
people?
status, the citizenship. Of course they should. That's what we should do as a nation. How we get there has been very difficult.
Right.
But we need to. That's where you start to do a little bit of you give up this and you give up that, and it may not be the best. It may not be the best, but it's getting to the place where people can live here without fear of deportation and without separating mothers from their children. That just pains me.
We have time for one more question.
Or dreamers. When we deport dreamers, that's crazy.
Hi, here, right here. My name is Mauricio Ascuñan. I'm from the Federal Reserve. I'm the chair of the Hispanic Employee Committee. So
Hi,
first of all,
Mauricio.
thank you so much for letting me be here in the Latina Leaders Summit.
No.
So
We are all encompassing.
my question for you is, I understand that society needs to understand the value of diversity and also the value that Latinos in general can provide.
Yes.
But what will be your advice for us, for the Latinos? What type of skills, what type of experience, what type of knowledge we still need to increase in order to get more opportunities?
Great question, right? Wow.
What a great question.
I mean, yours were great too.
No.
Well, by participating in forums like this, it's so important to network, to help each other. And maybe you know of a job that's opened up in the Federal Reserve and you can tell somebody about it and you help somebody. Never be afraid to help somebody else. You know, it doesn't take away your bright light. It helps others. And like that saying says, it lifts all boats. So help each other, be aware of what's happening, and don't be afraid to speak out in meetings and in your job. Sometimes we're very meek and we're very passive, and I encourage people to speak out more and to state what their position is and what their problem at work is. We've got to be our own best cheerleaders, and we don't do enough of it. We're waiting for others to give us affirmation. We need to be self-affirmative.
All right, Congresswoman, thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Ana,
I know
and
there are
see
more
her this
questions.
weekend.
Apologies. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Bye.
nice to have a
I'm going to
conversation
scoot
with you.
right in front of you.
Please do. And good luck in your
Thank you,
second
everybody.
act of
Thank you.
retiring, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Congresswoman Ross Layton, and what a thrill to hear from you, a fellow Cubana, this morning. And staying on for the next conversation, I would now like to introduce Congresswoman Lucille Roybal Allard, who represents California's 40th Congressional District. A familiar face for those of you from Los Angeles, Roybal Allard has been a longtime advocate for her district and the broader Latino community. In 1992, she became the first Mexican-American woman elected to Congress. She also happens to be the first Latina to serve on the powerful House Appropriations Committee. Please welcome Congresswoman Lucille Roybal Allard. Anna, back to you.
So nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
Well, thank you for spending time with us, Congresswoman. First, I want to get a little sense of how you got to your position. We know you were elected in 1992, the first Mexican-American woman to serve on Congress, but you had quite a role model in your own family, your father, who served in Congress also for 30 years. Did you always want to be a Congresswoman?
No, I never even wanted to get into politics. Having been raised in a political family, I understood firsthand what a difficult job it was and the impact that it had on families. And I was brought up to always think about supporting others in office, and never thought about myself as being one of those that would seek elected office. In fact, my brother and my sister still think I'm crazy, because it's a wonderful job. It's a wonderful experience. You're able to do so much to help your community and to fight for your community. But at the same time, it's a tremendous sacrifice for the family, because it isn't just the person that gets elected. It's the entire family that is impacted by the election.
So how did you end up?
Well, I actually ran, the first time I ran was for the state assembly. And it was because of a Latina who had won another position, who called and asked me if I would run in her place. And I was shocked, because like I said, I'd never thought about running for elected office. But that's an example of Latinas helping Latinas and opening doors of opportunity. And when a friend called to say that she was going to call me to ask me to run, I actually thought he was kidding. And he told them that he knew me since grammar school, would never do it. But timing is everything. I literally was looking to see what I wanted to do next. My husband had a job, his own business, where he was traveling 48 weeks out of the year. And my kids were in high school, looking to go to college. And this opportunity was presented to me. And having grown up in politics and working in nonprofits and in the community my entire adult life up to that point, I had firsthand knowledge of how you could really make a difference by being in an elected office. And so I decided that I would run for the assembly. And I got to Congress because the voters put in term limits into the state legislature. And this new district was created, congressional district was created. And so I had the choice of being termed out or running for Congress. And I decided that I would run in this new district. Again, opportunity. And you never know when opportunities are going to open up. So you always have to be prepared to be able to take advantage of those opportunities, because they can just come out of nowhere.
And yet, as a Latina, have you faced unique challenges because of your identity as a Latina, do you think? Especially in the good old boys club, so to speak, a lot of white men in Congress.
Right. Oh, absolutely. In fact, Ileana is going to be a tremendous loss. She's retiring. I don't know if that was mentioned. But when I came to Congress, there was only 3 Latinas. I was the first Mexican-American. Ileana was the first Cuban-American. And Nidia Velázquez was the first Puerto Rican. And there was only 3 of us. And in addition to all the issues that each and every one of you face every day as women, we also had to explain to our Congress colleagues what the difference was between me, Nidia, and Ileana. I am not joking. I am not joking. And I was shocked when I came to Congress, because most of members of Congress, particularly when my dad got elected in the 60s, I was already in my 20s, so I didn't grow up in a congressional family. There were members of Congress had never met another minority other than African Americans that were here in DC, but had never met a Mexican American. And I was just shocked, absolutely shocked. When for them, a Mexican was the ambassador from Mexico or from Japan, but in some cases there were members who had never met another minority,
That
an
speaks
American.
volumes. And your father was the one who actually came up with this idea to have a Hispanic Congressional Caucus or Congressional Hispanic Caucus. I know you're a member of that caucus
Right.
today. Why do you think it's important to have a Hispanic Congressional Caucus, and what do you see as its role?
Okay. Well, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, when it was started, there was only, I think there was 3 to 5 Latino members at the time. And because there was so little understanding and knowledge about Latinos at that time, that my father, seeing what was happening with, the Black Caucus existed and how they were able to pull together and focus on issues that were important specifically to the Latino community, he went to Tip O'Neill and said he wanted to start the Hispanic Caucus. And because they were so small at the time, in terms of numbers, Tip O'Neill laughingly or kiddingly said to my dad, well, Ed, okay, you can form the caucus, but where are you going to meet, in a telephone booth? That's how few there were at that time. But since then, it has grown, and it is because of the Hispanic Caucus that for over the years that I have been there, that the focus, and we have pushed on having comprehensive immigration reform. It's because of the Hispanic Caucus that the battles that you see in Congress to protect our immigrant community, it's because of the members of the Hispanic Caucus. Without the Hispanic Caucus, especially in the earlier days, those issues would have been ignored. And so I can honestly tell you the Hispanic Caucus plays a tremendous role in making sure that our leadership, both Republicans and Democrats, do not overlook the specific needs of our Latino community. But it also is important in terms of our message, is that helping to educate our colleagues and the rest of the country that Latino issues are the same as every American issue. We all want the same thing. We want good paying jobs. We want to have our children to have a good education. We want to have clean air, clean water. Our issues are really, when you think about it, no different than anybody else. But what happens very often, they try to separate us, make us feel like we're different. And that's where the fear is created in our country, where it's them, whoever them may be, those who don't support us, and us, and that we're adversaries. So part of our role is helping the country to understand that, no, we're all Americans, we all want the same thing. And that is a huge challenge, especially now in today's environment.
Democrats have been criticized for taking the Latino vote for granted. Where do you see your party falling short in terms of the outreach?
I think to some degree, that is true. And I think you have to separate it out. You can't put it all into every single area and every single district, because part of the challenge that we have as Latinos is to help our Latino constituents to understand the value and the importance of civic engagement. Because very often, for example, what I'm told when I go out and talk to my constituents is about the importance of civic engagement. It's, para qué? I've got 2 and 3 jobs. I'm too busy. My kids have to work. I can't afford to send them to college. All the things that I'm sure not only that you have heard, but many of you are experiencing yourself. So part of it is helping to educate our community about the connection between what we do, for example, 3,000 miles away from California, and how that impacts their everyday life. That is the decisions that elected officials make that determine minimum wage, that determine health care, that determine how much money goes to education, that determines, their ability to buy a house. And once our community, members of our community, start to understand and realize that connection, that in reality they can't afford not to be involved and to elect people who are going to represent our interests, the light goes on, and I've seen it in several areas in my own district. They become activists, and they organize, and they have been able to stop the building of a prison in East Los Angeles. They have been able to stop the building of a hazardous waste incinerator right in the center of my district. They have been able to fight the school district, and who had in their area for 30 years, the kids were still in bungalows, and now they have brand new schools, which the community itself told them where they wanted to build them and what they wanted to look like. So there is power in our community, but our community has to understand and believe that they have that power, because once they do, they're unstoppable.
Now, when it comes to your role in Congress, you are a leader, you are on the House Appropriations Committee, a ranking member, first Latina to serve as a chair or ranking member on a committee like that. Do you feel like you have a role to try to bridge the divide, this very partisan divide that has gotten deeper, it seems, and deeper? When you look at the current set of issues that are out there in the administration's agenda, what do you hope to accomplish under this current administration as a Democrat, as a minority in Congress, a minority party in Congress? Where are the issues that you think will see the nation get something done?
That is a really difficult question. Right now, a lot of what we're doing is really trying to prevent the worst of things from happening. If you look at the president's budget and the cuts that he has made to programs that are important to our communities, whether it's in education, training in the workforce, whether it has to do with health care. I mean, a lot of it is right now is trying to prevent that from happening. What you don't see is a lot of the work that many of us do behind the scenes to make that happen. And I can just use the 2017 budget for example, or appropriations that was passed. Some of the things that were proposed and that were being pushed would have been far worse for our immigrant community. But because of the ability of some to work behind the scenes and to work with our Republican colleagues to find some common ground to be able to make it less onerous, and I'm saying less, because it's not the bill that I would have written or the Democrats would have written.
But that's about compromise,
yes,
right?
Yes, and so we were able to eliminate a lot of the extremely negative things that were in that bill pertaining to education, healthcare, immigration. Now, 2018 is going to be a whole different story based on what we're seeing today. Today we're having a markup in military construction. We have no budget. And we have no idea what the allocations are for the other 11 bills. This is in military construction. We know that they have added millions of dollars more to that, but where are they taking it out of? If history is any indication, every time more money goes into defense, military construction, and these other, and Homeland Security, in which I am the ranking member, it usually comes out of labor age, which is healthcare, education, all the programs that are important to our community. So that's where the fight's going to be. And I just want to say one thing, because I think it's important that the public doesn't confuse the debates that we have and the disagreements that we have on policy with the contentiousness that is out there that has ended up in the tragedy that we witnessed yesterday. There is a difference. One of the concerns that I have is that, you know, we were united, we held hands, we crossed the aisle to show our support and to let the public know that, as our speaker said, we are all Americans. If it happens to one, it happens to all of us. But we're going to go into a debate, I have a markup today, as I said, and we're going to disagree with the process of what's taking place. No budget, what's happening to labor age, all these things. My concern is that the public's going to say, oh my God, now they're back to fighting again. There is a difference.
How do you see that difference? And does what happened yesterday give you more fuel to try to reach across the aisle?
Well, the difference is debating policy versus attacking each other or the parties. My hope is that we will be able to find some common ground as we move forward. That remains to be seen. I know that on both sides of the aisle, there really is an effort to try and work together. And that's happening even before the tragedy of yesterday. Yeah. That is happening today, but that's not what you hear about. And I happen to...
Is it fair to call the Democratic Party the party of obstructionists like we hear from the current administration?
It is not. Because what they're saying about being obstructionists is us opposing the budget and the cuts to education, what they're trying to do with the raids and the rounding up of immigrants in the interior of our country. We're going to oppose that. And if they want to call that obstruction, then, so be it. But that's our responsibility, is to fight for the things that are important to our community. And this is why I'm saying I hope the public doesn't confuse the two things between what caused yesterday's tragedy, the demonizing of individual members of Congress and parties, and our obligation to fight for the values and the things that we believe in on behalf of our constituents. There is a difference.
If you have questions, please raise your hands. If we could get a microphone to the woman who's raising her hand. We've got questions.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Jennifer. I'm also Mexican-American from California. I had no idea that you were the first Mexican-American in Congress. That's sad almost, and I think part of my question, I think we're talking a lot about, the first generation, second generations of Latinos here, but I'm thinking a lot about our families and how democracy for a lot of our immigrant families has failed them. So I think part of the discussion and how we engage our Latino community is the lack of civics in understanding how our process works. How can the party do better at that? How can we do better at that with our families? Because I know, within my family, it's very difficult for them to understand that I'd want to pursue and continue in politics and public service. It scares them. So I think, I'd like to know how we can better civics in our Latino community.
Well, again, I think it has to do with starting with you and helping to educate your own families about that connection between what elected officials do and how it impacts their everyday life, how it's important to their quality of life, to the lives of their grandchildren. And I think that's the starting point, is to educate and help your own family to understand that. I was very fortunate in the sense that I grew up in that atmosphere. My first memory, and I asked my mother about it, because it was about this little girl standing on a corner passing out leaflets, and I asked my mother, I have this memory, what was this? And she says, that was me standing with her in Boyle Heights, and she was passing out leaflets to re-elect President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I'm dating myself here, right? So I grew up in a family that modeled.
So there needs to be that exposure.
Yeah, absolutely, that exposure. And part of it is when elected officials have, an open house or a community event, encourage them, go with them, and have them meet your elected official to try and demystify the office and just let them know that, like, we're human like everybody else. We have the same issues, the same problems. We fight with our husbands or our wives and our kids. We have all the same issues. We just happen to be in this position. And once you demystify it, and also to help people to understand that elected officials work for them, that it is their vote that hires us, and it is their vote for somebody else that can fire us. It is your taxes that pay our salaries, and that you and your families have every right to contact your elected officials, to hold us accountable, because you actually are our employers. And when they understand that they have that right, and you demystify the process, again, lights go on, and it's just a wonderful thing to see.
We are pretty much out of time, but I want to make sure we get at least one more question.
Hello, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for being here, and I want to take the time to thank the organizers of today's event. It's always so empowering to be surrounded by so many wonderful Latinas, so thank you so much. Specifically, I would like to thank you for being a first. I had the privilege of working for Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, and people like you give people like me hope and faith because you forged a path for us, and it's so important for us to be able to see people that look like us in these positions of power. That being said, with knowing what you know now, and being in this new interesting political climate, what advice would you give your younger self, specifically in your late 20s, early 30s?
My younger side. Thank you for
more
that.
specific.
Yes, thank
And just with your experiences and everything, and kind of how I feel as though you have to be ready to fight now more than ever. So knowing all of that, what advice would you have for yourself at that age range and for the women here today?
Not to be so scared. Don't let being afraid keep you from pushing forward, because that was something I always struggled. I was the first in my family to graduate from college. And when I went to college, there was just a handful of minorities there. This was Cal State LA. I don't know if any of you, right now is a large Latino, population there. But we were made to feel unwelcome. And, pushing through that and not letting others try and define you. Because you're constantly having to struggle with that little voice that sometimes takes in all the negativity that we hear, and that self-doubt. And one of the things that I was fortunate, and I think that helped me, was not only my father and my mother modeling for me the fighting of what was out there, because when he became the first Latino elected to the LA City Council, there was threats on his life, on my mother's life, threats, kidnapping. When going to grammar school, we used to have safe houses where if anyone tried to grab us, we were told, this is where we were supposed to run. And also, I was very, very fortunate, because when my father, after he lost the first time for city council, then won the second time through a community organizing that was taught, which became, after he got elected, that group, the community came together, realizing their power, and they formed the Community Service Organization, the CSO, which is where, and I was fortunate to meet as a little girl, met Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. They trained in Boyle Heights, the community organizing that they learned in Boyle Heights with the CSO, and then went on to organize the farm workers. So I was fortunate to have a lot of this modeling for me. you are all models. You may not feel that, but each and every one of you are models. You have come to the point that you are at with the same kinds of prejudice, the same struggles, the same issues that I and everybody else. I'm here because of what others did before me. I didn't just, get here on my own because I'm Lucille Roybal Ellard. There were others who laid that foundation for me to be here. The same with, others. You right now are also laying that foundation. You are building on the foundation that was laid for you. And you all have power, and you need to realize that power. And it is scary. I can tell you that. I knew nothing about politics. My father was a politician. I wasn't. Just like if your father's, a surgeon, you don't automatically know how to, operate, right? Well, I didn't know anything about politics except as being the daughter of. And when I got to Sacramento as an assemblywoman and I came to Congress, I was scared and I was nervous.
Well, Congresswoman, thank you for sharing your courage and your bravery and your story with all of us. I wish we had more time to speak.
Okay, thank
so
you.
nice to meet
Okay.
you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.